There is a moment in a courtroom or a press conference, or sometimes even on live television, when the air changes. Not because anyone shouted, not because something exploded, but because a silence arrived that no amount of talking could fix. The kind of silence that tells everyone in the room that something just ended permanently, that something they believed in or were told to believe in quietly died right in front of them. That moment happened in a packed debate venue while 40 million people were watching, and it was not caused by an argument. It was caused by a piece of paper. A perfectly blank, completely empty piece of paper that a sitting United States congressman held up in front of broadcast cameras as though it contained proof of something, only for every person in that building and everyone watching from home to realize simultaneously that there was absolutely nothing written on it. 3 years of assertions, 3 years of primetime appearances, 3 years of classified briefings and secure facilities and evidence so conclusive it could not be revealed in public. And when the moment finally arrived to show it, what appeared under those studio lights was a sheet so white and so empty it looked like it had just come out of a ream. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand the woman sitting in the second row. She drove alone that night. Came in from outside the city, a school teacher who had spent 3 years defending every word of this narrative at her own kitchen table, at her sister-in-law's birthday party, at a neighborhood gathering that turned ugly when someone wore the wrong hat. She had lost contact with her brother over this. Not a pause in communication. An actual fracture. A relationship that once filled holiday dinners with noise and warmth now filled them with an empty chair and a cell phone she had not dialed in 2 years. She came to the venue that night, looking for something most people never admit they are looking for. Not more arguments, not more clips to share. She came looking for someone to tell her it was worth it. That the certainty she had loaned out, the certainty she had borrowed from this man on her television and handed over to every fight she had fought on his behalf, was backed by something real. Remember her. She is the whole point of this story. Adam Schiff arrived on that stage, the way seasoned performers arrive at venues they have conquered before. There was nothing tentative about him. The leather folder he carried was positioned under his arm like a prop he had rehearsed with for years, and in a sense he had carried some version of that folder onto television stages, into congressional chambers, into weekend news segments across 6 different networks for the better part of 3 consecutive years. It was practically a character costume at this point. The man with the binder. The man who had seen the documents. The man who knew what the rest of you could not be trusted to handle. When his turn to speak arrived, he did not waste a single second settling in. He reached straight for the register that had always worked. "Let me be direct with the American people," he said, squaring himself to the cameras. "There are those in this country who have spent years telling you that none of this was real, that this was theater, that you were being misled. And I understand the appeal of that. It asks nothing of you. It is comfortable." He let a small, tight smile cross his face, the kind that communicates not warmth but condescension disguised as patience. "But some of us sat in classified settings, some of us reviewed intelligence that the public will never be cleared to see. So forgive me if I am not going to treat a TV studio as the appropriate venue for adjudicating national security. Most Americans simply do not have access to the level of detail that would make all of this completely clear to them." The audience did not erupt. They went somewhere colder than that. Because what Adam Schiff had just done, with that measured tone and that practiced half-smile, was look directly into the eyes of 40 million citizens who had been following this story for years, carrying it into their relationships and their dinner tables and their neighborhood associations, and he had told them they were not sophisticated enough to understand it. That the truth was locked behind doors they were not intelligent enough to open. He delivered this not as an insult. He delivered it as a compliment to himself. If you have ever been dismissed like that, if you have ever been told by someone in a position of authority that the reason you cannot see what they see is because you simply lack the capacity, go ahead and hit that like button right now, because the man who just said that to you is about to be asked to open the folder. And what happens next has never been shown this clearly on live television. Donald Trump did not raise his voice. That is the first thing you need to understand about what followed, because it runs counter to everything his critics have spent years insisting about his style. He did not get louder, he did not get combative, he went in the opposite direction entirely, and that stillness was more devastating than any argument could have been. He let the silence after Schiff's speech sit in the room untouched for an extra beat, long enough that people started wondering if he was going to respond at all. Then he leaned forward. "That was something," Trump said, and there was almost something appreciative in his voice, the way a chess player might sound when an opponent makes a move that has already lost the game. "The classified facilities. The things only he gets to see. I've heard this presentation before. I've been hearing it for years, actually. He made a small, unhurried gesture. So what I'd like to do today is something we've never done before. Instead of talking about what's in the folder, let's have him show us what's in the folder. Because I've brought dates, Adam. I've written them down. And I think the people out there, the ones you're not sure are equipped for the specifics, I think they can follow along just fine. This is not a courtroom exercise, Schiff replied. You are correct, Trump said. It is much simpler than that. Because the answers are already on the record. You gave them yourself. He reached down and picked up a single sheet of paper the way a man picks up a grocery receipt. No drama. No flourish. Just a document held flat in two hands. March 2017, he began, reading from the page. You go on television. You're sitting across from Chuck Todd, and he asks you point blank, do you have actual proof? And your answer, in your own words, is that you're looking right at it. More than circumstantial, you said. Those were your words, not my characterization. Yours. More than circumstantial. He set the page down on the table with a quiet, deliberate flatness. That was a long time ago, Adam. Kids who were 14 years old when you said that are in the workforce now. So I've got a simple question, same one Chuck had. What was it? What were you looking at? The room went very, very quiet. There is a significant distinction, Schiff said, his voice careful and controlled, between seeing the indicators of a coordinated effort and being able to establish criminal conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt in a federal proceeding. I have always been precise about that line. I have never conflated those two things. I appreciate that framing, Trump said. I genuinely do, but that is not what I asked. You did not go on that program and say I have a feeling. You did not say the evidence is suggestive. You said you had it. You said it was right in front of you. More than circumstantial. He tapped the page once. So I'm not asking about your legal theory. I'm asking what was in the folder. I stand behind every statement I have made, Schiff replied. Good, Trump said, and there was something deliberate in the way he said it. Hold on to that. You're going to need it. He produced a second document. December 2017, he continued, placing it beside the first. Now you are on CNN, and you are not being cautious anymore. Now you are walking the public through it like a closing argument. The campaign was offered assistance. The campaign accepted that assistance. The assistance was delivered, and the administration made use of it. He laid the second sheet parallel to the first. Offered, accepted, delivered, used. That is 4 sequential steps, Adam. That is a verdict, not a theory. A prosecutor doing a closing argument lays out those 4 steps. You laid out those 4 steps to the entire country. And I would say the same thing today, Schiff replied. I'm sure you would, Trump said. But here's the part that I find interesting. He touched both documents with a finger on each. During those exact same months, you were also telling select journalists, very carefully, that you can't call it verified proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So I need to understand which version is the real one. Is it offered, accepted, delivered, used, case closed? Or is it, I must be careful, it's complicated, I can't discuss the specifics? He spread his hands open. Because you cannot have it both ways. It cannot be right in front of us, and also locked in a facility only you can enter. Pick one location for it, Adam. Either it exists where the rest of us can see it, or it only exists where you are standing. And here is where Adam Schiff did the thing that had saved him in every previous debate he had ever been in. He pivoted. He did not try to defend the timeline, because defending specific dates was a trap he was too experienced to walk into. Instead, he redirected the entire conversation toward moral architecture, toward the kind of framework that sounds so principled that audiences forget what the original question was. You want to talk about standards, he said, his cadence finding its footing again, the confidence returning the way it always did when he moved to this ground. Let's talk about what divides us in this country. There are people who believe that if you cannot lock someone up in a courtroom, then everything is permissible, that a president can do whatever he wants as long as investigators can't close the case. And then there are people who believe that public servants have an obligation that goes beyond beating a criminal indictment. That we are allowed, in fact, we are required to warn this country about conduct that is dangerous and corrosive, even if it does not clear the bar of a provable felony. I have never been ashamed of holding that standard, and I am not ashamed of it now. I don't think most Americans share your view on this. I think they share mine, and for approximately 20 seconds you had to hand it to him, because the room shifted. A journalist in the third row stopped writing and gave a slow, single nod. An aide behind Schiff pressed his lips together and nodded twice quickly, the body language of someone thinking we are back. The educator in the second row felt the reassurance seep back into her chest like warm water. This was the voice she recognized. This was the man she had built 3 years of conviction around. It lasted exactly 20 seconds. Because what Schiff had just told a national audience, buried inside that principled language, was that a sitting official could declare a person guilty in public without proof, and the absence of proof was not the problem. The problem was everyone else's inability to appreciate the higher moral framework. A lawmaker had just told 40 million people that guilt does not require evidence if the person declaring it has sufficiently elevated intentions. If that logic made something in your gut tighten, type one word in the comments section right now. Type the word specifics. Just that one word and keep watching, because this is the exact moment everything in that room turns over. Trump did not take the bait. He did not defend himself legally. He did not get into attorneys and procedures and indictment thresholds, which was precisely the terrain Schiff wanted, the terrain where Schiff had always won. Instead, he reached beneath the first 2 documents and produced a third one that no one had noticed sitting there. That was a beautiful statement, Trump said, and his voice had dropped almost to conversational, a higher obligation. I want to take that seriously because you're framing this as you on one side and people like me on the other. So let me read you who actually had a problem with your conduct. He smoothed the page with his palm. June 21, 2023, the United States House of Representatives. Not my campaign, not my legal team, not a cable news host. The full chamber voted, 213 to 209, a formal censure, permanently entered into the congressional record. For the specific conduct of making false and misleading statements to the public about classified intelligence. He looked up. You are one of 3 people this century to receive that from your own colleagues. The room was so quiet you could hear the air handling system, and I want you to tell me what happened on the floor while that vote was being counted, Trump continued, because your allies surrounded the members who were voting and they started chanting. Shame. They were screaming it. Shame, shame, shame. He set the document down. But here's the thing about yelling at him. It doesn't change arithmetic. 213 is still larger than 209 no matter how loudly the losing side yells. The chanting stopped. The vote did not. That proceeding was a partisan exercise, and everyone watching knows it, Schiff said, but his voice had changed. It was higher by a half step. The first small fracture in a tone that had been immaculate for the last 15 minutes. Maybe, Trump acknowledged. But you just told this audience this is about moral standards. Your side against mine. Higher obligation. So the chamber itself, the full body of your peers, stood up and put your name next to people who were censured 100 years ago for deceiving the public. That is not my doing. That is the permanent record. You said the public supports your standard. The public's elected representatives took a vote. The math doesn't lie. Something heavy shifted in that room, not loudly. It moved the way a large structure moves when a load-bearing element quietly fails. The educator in the second row felt it before she could name it. The warmth that had returned to her chest 20 seconds ago was gone again, and this time it left behind something colder, something more uncomfortable, something she did not want to look at directly. She had borrowed her certainty from this man for 3 years. Certainty works like that. You can borrow it from someone else as long as they can keep producing receipts. The moment the receipts stop matching the story, the borrowed certainty starts costing you more than it ever gave you. If you have ever been corrected on something you were absolutely sure about because someone you trusted told you to be sure, subscribe to this channel right now, because what happens next is not just one conversation. It is the explanation for everything that preceded it. Trump let the silence work for him again. He picked up a glass of water, took a deliberate sip, and set it back down. The small crisp sound of the glass touching the table was the only noise in the room for several full seconds. I was going to stop there, he said, and something in his tone told the room he meant it. I want to be fair, I've misspoken plenty. Anyone who's been in the public eye long enough has. A laugh moved through his side of the room, genuine and brief. So I'm not trying to build a career-ending case out of a single bad interview. That's not what this is. He paused, but this isn't a single bad interview, Adam. This is the same mechanism, repeated for years, and I think the public deserves to see it working one time in full light. He reached into his own folder. And this is the moment that crystallized everything, not in a loud way, but in the way that the smallest details sometimes carry the largest weight. His folder held almost nothing, a handful of pages. No binders packed with exhibits, no theatrical stacks of files, just a few thin sheets that somehow, by their sheer modesty, made the leather folder sitting across the table look more and more like a stage prop. You ran the Intelligence Committee, Trump said. You were the chairman, the most powerful oversight position in the country for exactly this kind of matter. Your committee conducted depositions. 57 witnesses, 57 people who came in, raised their hand, and testified under oath. He pulled out another page. And when the transcripts came out, do you know what 57 sworn depositions revealed? Zero evidence of coordination. Not insufficient evidence. Not inconclusive evidence. The witnesses your committee chose, the questions your people asked, the sworn testimony collected under your chairmanship said there was nothing there. He put the page down flat, and then you did something I want everyone watching to sit with for a moment. You had those transcripts? The actual sworn record that directly contradicted what you had been telling the public for 2 full years, and you kept them in a drawer. You did not release them. For nearly 24 months, those depositions sat in your possession while you went on television and told this country the evidence was right in front of them. You finally released the transcripts the day before the executive branch was going to release them without your permission. Not a week before, not a month before, the day before when you had no remaining options. Those documents were classified and required an appropriate declassification process, which I followed correctly. Something you would understand if you had ever adhered to a process in your life, Schiff said. You told this country the proof was right in front of them, Trump replied, his voice quiet. You said it constantly, right in front of us. You made it your phrase. And then you took the one binder that held the actual sworn record and you locked it in the dark for 2 years. He opened his hands. It cannot be right in front of us and also sealed in your office at the same time. Those are 2 different locations, Adam. Either it was visible, or you were the only one allowed to see it and you hated what it said. The audience did not laugh. They did something harder to recover from than laughter. They exhaled together all at once, hundreds of people releasing the same breath at the identical moment when the same realization landed in all of them simultaneously. It is a specific sound. Anyone who has been in a room when a collective illusion dissolves knows it. It sounds like water pulling back from a beach before a wave that never comes. He had the transcripts. The whole time, and he kept them locked away while telling everyone the evidence was right in front of them. If that landed somewhere in you that is not comfortable, share this with one person right now. One person who spent those years trusting this narrative, then come back immediately because Schiff is about to fight back harder than he has all night, and Trump is about to deliver the line that closes everything. Schiff did not fold quietly. Give him that. He straightened in his seat, pulled the microphone closer, and came back with everything that was left. You want to reduce an entire career of public service to one binder, he said, his voice precise and controlled, the pace of someone who has been in losing debates before and knows how to slow the bleeding. Let's talk about my record. I prosecuted actual criminals before you ever considered public life. I served on that committee under threat levels I have never discussed publicly because the position demands discretion. And at no point, not one single time, did I tell the American people I had secured a criminal conviction in a court of law. I said there was material that warranted investigation. An investigation occurred. Conducting oversight is not the same as fabricating evidence. Sounding an alarm is not the same as manufacturing a crime. I did my job. I asked the questions that a free society is obligated to ask about powerful figures. And you want to stand here and tell 40 million Americans that asking questions is a criminal act? That is the most dangerous sentence anyone has spoken in this building tonight, and the people watching should be frightened by it regardless of what they think of me. And it worked. For a moment, it actually worked. You could feel the room stabilizing around him again. The journalist in the third row lowered her pen. 2 people in Schiff's section leaned forward. The tide that had been pulling away paused, held, and began to consider returning. Trump waited. He waited the way someone waits when they know the outcome and understand that patience is not passive. It is the most active choice available to them. Nobody on this stage is afraid of questions, he said finally, and the volume was barely above a conversation. People at the back of the room had to lean in to hear him. I want a country that questions everything. Question me every day. Question everyone up here. But you didn't ask a question, Adam. He placed one finger on the first document and one finger on the last. You stood in front of this country for 3 years and you told them you already had the answer. You said you were looking right at it. More than circumstantial. Offered, accepted, delivered, used. That is not an inquiry. That is a conviction. You delivered a verdict to the American people every night for 3 years based on material you never actually possessed. He paused. When he continued, his voice had moved into territory he had avoided all night. And I need you to understand who paid for that. Not me. I'm standing right here. Something shifted in his delivery. Something without a name in the usual vocabulary of political debate. It was the mother who stopped speaking to her son because of a bumper sticker. It was the brothers who haven't shared a meal since 2017. The coworkers who reported each other. The neighbors who called each other traitors at a school board meeting and never repaired it. Half of this country was convinced the other half had sold them out to a foreign government. People lost real relationships, real holidays, real family. He paused, and the origin of all of it, 3 years of it, was a man who already knew his own sworn depositions, said there was nothing there, who had the transcripts in a drawer, and still went on television and told the country the proof was right in front of them. Nobody laughed, nobody cheered. The room absorbed it the way a room absorbs the truth when it arrives in a form that is too large for immediate reaction. In the second row, the school teacher had gone completely still. She was doing the math she had been avoiding doing for 3 years. She was thinking about a phone number she had not dialed, and a brother she had not seen, and an empty chair at a table that used to hold noise and history and warmth. "Sir, with all due respect," Schiff began. "We're past respect, Adam," Trump said, not sharply, just factually. "Respect ended about 40 minutes ago. Right before you told the people in this room, they didn't have the capacity to understand what you were telling them. I understood it just fine, so did they. What happened next was not planned. It was instinct. Pure muscle memory from 3 years of doing the same thing every time a debate started going sideways." Adam Schiff reached for his binder, the leather one, the one he had carried out like a talisman. He opened it with both hands the way you open something you believe in, and he began going through the pages, looking for the document that would end this, the specific exhibit that would restore everything, the proof that was, as he had promised on so many occasions, right in front of them. He turned a page, a press clipping. He turned another, a list of talking points. He went back, he went forward, his hands moved faster and then slower. 40 million people watched a man search through his own evidence and come up empty-handed, not because he was hiding anything, but because there was nothing to find. There had never been anything to find. The folder that had functioned as a prop for 3 years, a physical object that communicated authority and certainty and possession of something real, contained nothing that could prove what it had been used to imply. The only sound in the entire room was the dry, papery whisper of pages being turned. Faster, then slower, then nothing. His hand came to rest, flat on a completely blank page. "It was never right in front of us, Adam," Trump said into the silence. There was nothing there to see. 8 words, not delivered as a triumph, not shouted as a victory lap, said the way you say something when the saying of it is unnecessary, because the room has already arrived at the conclusion on its own. Adam Schiff looked down at the blank page under his hand, for a moment that lasted much longer than it should have. And then he closed the folder. With both hands. The way you close something you are finished with. The soft thud of the leather covers coming together was the quietest, most conclusive sound in the room. The moderator cleared his throat and asked if the congressman wished to offer a rebuttal. He did not wish to offer a rebuttal. Before the studio lights had finished brightening, the clip had already been titled. Someone had isolated the sequence, the binder spinning to face the cameras, the hands searching, the pages turning in silence, the 8 words, the folder closing. By midday, it was inescapable on every platform. But here's the thing that should have alarmed him more than the virality. People were not debating the underlying substance anymore. Nobody was arguing about conspiracy theories or counterintelligence assessments or legal thresholds. The argument was over. They were simply watching a man hold up a blank page and say the word proof on a loop, because a loop was all it needed to be. The evening news programs all led with the same frozen frame. The folder open and facing out. The white page angled into the camera lens. One network ran nothing alongside it except the 8 words in white text on a black background, because every additional word would have been a distraction from what the image had already said completely. In a corridor outside the main hall, a Democratic congressman who had been publicly supportive of Schiff for years was cornered by a reporter. He checked both ends of the hallway before speaking. Then he spoke anyway. "Everyone always knew the folder was thin," he said quickly, his voice low. "You don't abandon your colleagues over that. You hold the line because that's what loyalty requires, even when the line is uncomfortable. But there is no press release in the world that makes people unsee a blank piece of paper. He's going to find that out this week." The congressman walked away before the recorder was fully raised. The school teacher drove home alone in the dark. She did not turn on the radio. She did not call anyone. Somewhere near the edge of the county, she pulled off onto the shoulder of the highway and sat with the engine running and the hazard lights going orange, orange, orange in the orange, orange, orange into the dark. She was thinking about a specific sound, the sound of pages turning faster and then slower, and then going silent. The sound of a man searching in a folder for something that was not there. The sound of 3 years of certainty running out of pages. She was thinking about her brother. She did not call him that night. But she held the phone in her hand and looked at his name for a long time. She decided she would call over the weekend. It would be a hard conversation. It might take several calls to get through everything that needed to be said. But the decision was made on a dark highway shoulder with orange lights blinking, and that was where the long process of repair quietly began. Donald Trump, meanwhile, did something almost no one predicted as he exited the debate floor. He did not hold a press conference. He did not make a statement. As he passed the table where Adam Schiff was still sitting, he reached over without breaking his stride and flipped the leather folder back open. He positioned it so the blank page faced the cameras that were still running, and he left it there, open, facing out. The blank page under full studio lighting. He walked out of the room and left the cameras recording the most honest thing that had been in that folder for 3 years. A blank page is not nothing. A blank page is actually the most specific kind of evidence there is. It is evidence of absence. It is the shape that a claim leaves behind when it finally has to stand on its own and cannot. For 3 years, the country was told the proof existed. That it was visible, that it was documented, that anyone with proper clearance could see it clearly. People structured their lives around that certainty. They strained their relationships around it. They repeated it at kitchen tables and in comment sections and at family gatherings. They loaned their trust to a man who carried a folder and a phrase right in front of us like a password that unlocked the door to being on the correct side of history. The folder was real. The leather was real. The phrase was real. The commitment in his eyes when he said it was real. The page inside was blank, and the most important thing that happened in that building was not the debate. It was not the 8 words or the censure vote or the documents with dates. The most important thing was a schoolteacher in the second row who drove home in silence and pulled over on a dark highway and picked up a phone she had not touched in 2 years and looked at her brother's name. Because the real cost of a blank page is not to the politician who carried it. Politicians survive blank pages. They write statements, they give interviews, they reframe and reposition, and eventually move on. The real cost is to the people who reorganize their lives around what they were told was inside. If you felt that, if you know someone who spent those years in that position, someone who trusted the folder and paid for it in a relationship they are still trying to recover, share this with them. Just one person. Send it without a message. They will understand why you sent it. If you have been demanding receipts for 3 years and being told you were not sophisticated enough to understand the answer, subscribe to this channel right now because your skepticism was not a character flaw. It was the correct instinct. It was the one thing that was actually right in front of you the whole time. And the ultimate proof of everything, as it turned out, required no security clearance to see.